Long before the kingdom of Israel ascended to its zenith, another drama unfolded east of the Dead Sea. A saga woven with threads of scandal, survival, and shadow. From the ashes of Sodom and Gomorrah, amidst the lingering scent of sulfur and despair, a people emerged, their origins steeped in controversy. Their name would become synonymous with conflict and divine judgment. Yet their story is inextricably linked to the very lineage of the Messiah. They were the Moabites, an ancient tribe whose narrative is far more complex than simple animosity with Israel. Their identity, forged in the crucible of incest, betrayal, and war, raises profound questions about fate, free will, and the enduring consequences of our choices. How did a nation born from such a questionable beginning rise to challenge the chosen people of God? What unexpected turns of events reshaped their destiny forever? And could it be that the Moabites' tumultuous past holds vital, even uncomfortable lessons for us today? What echoes of their legacy resonate in our modern world? Prepare to delve into the heart of this forgotten biblical chapter, a journey into the shadows where you'll confront the complexities of human nature and the unfathomable depths of divine providence. If you're ready to explore this intricate tale of intrigue, conflict, and surprising grace, then brace yourself, because the story of Lot's sons, their rise to power, and their ultimate clash with Israel will challenge your perceptions of destiny, redemption, and the very nature of God's will. Incest, betrayal, and war. The unholy trinity that fueled the Moabites' ascent against Israel. To truly understand the weight carried by the name Moab, we must journey back to one of the most haunting and morally ambiguous episodes in the Bible, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, vividly depicted in Genesis 19. Imagine the sky turning an apocalyptic shade of crimson as God unleashed a torrent of fire and brimstone upon those decadent cities. Amidst the chaos and cries of anguish, a lone figure, Lot, Abraham's nephew, fled with his 2 daughters, their hearts pounding with terror as they escaped the inferno. They sought refuge in the desolate mountains, far from the searing flames. Picture them huddled in a cave, the cold, rough stone pressing against their backs, the silence broken only by the mournful sigh of the wind. Fear, yes, but also a chilling sense of isolation, a creeping madness born from the belief that the world had ended. Lot's daughters looked around, their eyes reflecting the stark emptiness of their surroundings. Who would carry on their family's name? Who would ensure their father's legacy endured? Perhaps you, standing beside them in that dark cave, would feel the same gnawing desperation. It was in this desolate place, where shadows seemed to devour hope, that an unsettling plan began to take shape. Convinced that no other men remained alive on earth, Lot's daughters resolved to secure their family's future through the only means they could conceive. They would intoxicate their father with wine, clouding his judgment, and then each would lie with him, ensuring the continuation of their lineage. The scriptures don't shy away from the discomfort of this moment. Instead, they lay it bare, exposing the raw, unsettling truth for all to see. Thus were both the daughters of Lot, with child by their father. Genesis 19:36 bluntly states, holding nothing back from our scrutiny. Can you feel the eerie chill of that night? The unsettling realization that sin can be born from fear as much as from malice. As dawn broke over the rugged hills, both daughters carried within them the seed of a scandal that would echo through generations. The firstborn gave birth to a son and named him Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites unto this day. Genesis 19:37 declares, "Is it not astonishing that an entire nation, destined to become a formidable adversary of Israel, a nation that would draw swords and spill blood on the battlefield, originated from such a dark and twisted beginning?" How often, in our own lives, do the seeds of future conflicts take root in moments of fear, secrecy, and desperation, only to blossom into strife we could never have foreseen? And so, the legacy of Moab was tainted from the start, a people born from incest and hidden shame, destined to play a troubling role in the divine drama yet to unfold. One can't help but wonder if you were among Lot's daughters, standing at the edge of that cavern. Would the weight of loneliness and terror have driven you to make the same choice? Even today, does humanity not continue to repeat desperate mistakes when hope seems lost, writing new chapters of sorrow that echo faintly back to that ancient cave? The Bible, in its unflinching honesty, does not shy away from humanity's brokenness. Instead, it reveals it so that we might examine our own hearts. What chapter, we might quietly ask ourselves, are we writing right now in the darkness? But here's where the tale takes a surprising turn, a twist that defies conventional storytelling. Though the Moabites were conceived in shame and secrecy, products of fear and twisted desperation, they didn't simply vanish into the annals of forgotten history, as one might expect. Instead, they thrived. They multiplied, spreading across the land like seeds carried by the wind, firmly rooting themselves in the soil of the Dead Sea. Soon, they were erecting mighty walls, founding bustling cities, forging formidable armies, and developing a unique culture. Can you imagine walking through those streets, hearing the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the cheerful voices of children, never suspecting that all of it originated from one shadowy night in a cave? This territory, known as Moab in ancient times, rose defiantly from a place of scandal, carving out its mark on the map. Its land stretched across what we now recognize as modern-day Jordan, strategically located to the east of the Dead Sea's shimmering expanse. Yet, for all their apparent prosperity, the Moabites lived with watchful eyes fixed on their western horizon. And who could blame them? Beyond that horizon stirred whispers of a people unlike any other, descendants of Abraham's faith, a nation whose story was being written by the very hand of God. Picture this: Israel, wandering through the harsh wilderness, thousands upon thousands of freed slaves, transformed into a formidable nation, shielded by pillars of cloud by day and pillars of fire by night. Their every movement sent ripples of fear through the surrounding nations. What must it have been like for the Moabites to witness this vast assembly inching ever closer? Did parents hold their children tighter at night? Did kings convene urgent councils, their hearts pounding, as scouts returned with tales of the God who parted seas and toppled mighty Egypt? By the time we reach Numbers chapter 22, the stakes are impossibly high. The Israelites have pitched their tents in the plains of Moab, their countless campfires dotting the darkness like a galaxy fallen to earth. The very sight of them sent shockwaves of dread through Moab's hills and valleys. And Moab was sore afraid of the people because they were many. The scriptures record with a stark honesty that makes us pause. Numbers 22:3. Would you not have felt the same terror if you were a Moabite standing on your city walls, staring out at a horizon crowded with Israel's tents, hearing distant songs rising from a people led by a God who seemed to command the very elements. This was no distant threat. This was a living storm on Moab's doorstep. And it is fascinating, isn't it, to see how nations born from human mistakes, carved from secrecy and sin, can grow strong enough to stand toe to toe with God's chosen people. Even today, do we not see echoes of this, as flawed beginnings sometimes give rise to movements or empires that shape the destiny of millions? But as we watch this tense standoff unfold, one truth becomes clear. The Moabite story was far from over. Their uneasy watch over Israel would soon erupt into schemes, curses, and clashes that would resonate throughout prophecy itself. Who among us could have guessed that the seeds sown in that lonely mountain cave would blossom into such a fierce and fearful nation? And if we found ourselves among the Moabites, gazing out at that vast encampment, would we, too, have plotted desperately to protect our future? The king of Moab at that pivotal moment in history was Balak, a ruler whose heart trembled with fear as he surveyed his borders. To him, the Israelites were not weary pilgrims slowly approaching their final destination. They were a looming storm, a tidal wave of humanity poised to engulf his lands, his cities, his very throne. Can you imagine being Balak, pacing in his royal chambers, every whispered report from his scouts tightening the knot of anxiety in his chest? Driven by fear and desperate to safeguard what he believed was his rightful domain, Balak conceived a cunning plan. He wouldn't rely on mere armies or fortified walls to keep this strange nation at bay. Instead, he sought out a man of uncanny reputation, someone rumored to possess the power to manipulate the unseen realm. Enter Balaam, a spiritual mercenary, a figure renowned for wielding words that could bless or curse with terrifying force. What must it have been like to be Balak, sending precious gifts and urgent pleas to secure Balaam's services, clinging to the hope that one man's pronouncement might halt an entire nation? Balak's message to Balaam was direct, fueled by raw fear. "Come now, therefore, I pray thee, curse me this people, for they are too mighty for me." Numbers 22:6. Yet, in all his scheming, Balak failed to grasp the enormity of his actions. This wasn't merely a political maneuver to weaken an encroaching tribe. It was, in truth, an act of defiance against the living God of Israel. How often do we see people today attempting to manipulate outcomes without realizing they are contending with forces far beyond their control? God responded swiftly. He confronted Balaam directly, warning him in no uncertain terms not to curse Israel. This nation was under divine protection, shielded by promises that stretched back to Abraham himself. Thus, when Balaam finally arrived at Balak's summons, the stage was set for a spectacle that no earthly power could control. Picture Balaam's elaborate preparations, altars meticulously constructed on scenic heights, smoke from sacrifices spiraling into the sky, a nervous silence descending upon the gathered princes. Balaam raises his voice, perhaps anticipating venom to flow forth. But instead of curses, blessings erupt, words so imbued with divine authority that the very air seems to tremble. 3 separate times this unfolds. Can you see Balak's face turning green with rage, his hands clenching so tightly that his knuckles turn white, as Balaam repeatedly proclaims God's favor upon Israel? By the third oracle, the revelation breaks through in language that reverberates through eternity. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab. Numbers 24:17. Pause and let that vision sink in. This wasn't merely about Israel's future military triumph over Moab. It was something far grander. In this pronouncement, the shadow of Christ emerges. Jesus, the bright morning star, the scepter destined to rule, judge, and redeem. Isn't it astonishing that right there, in the high places of Moab, where curses were intended, God unveiled a glimpse of the Messiah, who would one day crush not only nations, but the very spiritual forces arrayed against his people. Imagine standing among Balak's cohorts, hearing these words thunder forth. Would your legs have buckled beneath you? Would you have sensed, even without fully understanding, that history itself was being shaped before your eyes? What strikes us even now is how God used what Balak intended for evil to declare one of Scripture's clearest messianic prophecies. Moab, the land that sought to orchestrate Israel's downfall through dark incantations, became the unlikely platform for proclaiming the victory of Christ, King of Kings, who would both shepherd his flock and strike down their fiercest enemies. Isn't that a truth that still resonates? So often, the very places meant to witness our destruction become the stages where God's greatest triumphs are announced. And if you found yourself on that dusty plain of Moab, watching altars burn and hearing heaven's secrets revealed, would you have grasped the far-reaching implications of those words? Even today, do we not live in the unfolding of that same divine story, awaiting the Star of Jacob to rise once more in final, unchallenged glory? But even then, the saga between Moab and Israel was far from its final verse, because the next chapter in their entangled history would introduce a battlefield unlike any seen before, one where blades and curses were replaced by seductive smiles, alluring eyes, and feasts that lured the soul away from holiness. The Moabites proved themselves to be far more treacherous than mere warriors wielding swords. They transformed into something far more insidious, a living, breathing trap, draped in charm and false splendor, waiting to ensnare the hearts of God's people. It all unfolds in the haunting pages of Numbers chapter 25. This time, the enemy didn't arrive brandishing spears or marching in formation. They came with laughter. They came with invitations. Picture the scene: the sun setting warmly over Moab's hills, tables laden with delicacies, music carried on the breeze, laughter echoing through camps where Moabite women moved like dancers among the Israelites. Their invitation seemed innocent enough. Who would suspect danger in the promise of a meal, a dance, a moment of joy? Can you honestly say your own feet wouldn't have been drawn toward those glowing lanterns and tempting aromas? At first, it was simply shared bread, cups raised in friendly toasts, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the laughter of the feast led to something darker. Altars to Baal appeared, shimmering with offerings. The song shifted from celebration to ritual. And there, in the twilight of the evening, hands joined not in innocent greeting, but in unions tainted with idolatry and lust. What began as neighborly companionship unraveled into outright spiritual treason. The Israelites, who had once stood in awe as the Red Sea parted before them, who had feasted on manna fallen from heaven, who had drunk from water gushing out of barren rock, these same people now knelt before statues of wood and stone. They traded the infinite majesty of the living God for lifeless idols, for images with mouths that could not speak and eyes that could not see. How fragile is the human heart when seduced by what it perceives as harmless pleasure. Psalm 106 tells us with somber clarity, "They joined themselves also unto Baal-peor, and ate the sacrifices of the dead. Thus they provoked him to anger with their inventions, and the plague brake in upon them." Psalm 106, 28-29. And God's judgment was swift and severe. Imagine waking to find the joyful songs of your camp replaced by wailing, as death swept through the tents like an unseen wind. 24,000 souls perished under that divine plague. Entire families lost, fires that once cooked daily bread, now smoldering cold beside empty sleeping mats. Is it not chilling to realize how easily comfort can morph into compromise? How quickly a feast can become a funeral? Would you have seen it coming had you been there? Or would the music have drowned out your caution too? And so, over generations, Moab came to represent more than just a plot of land east of the Dead Sea. It became a living symbol of the subtle enemies that perpetually stalk God's people. Idolatry cloaked in the soft robes of pleasure, arrogance masquerading as cultural pride, corruption concealed beneath age-old traditions. It wasn't merely the carved images that invited God's wrath. It was the pride that burned behind Moab's smiling face, the arrogance that whispered, "We don't need the God of Israel. We'll forge our own path, worship on our own terms." Through his prophets, God left no room for doubt about his view of such defiance. "We have heard of the pride of Moab," thundered Jeremiah. "He is exceeding proud. His loftiness, and his arrogancy, and his pride, and the haughtiness of his heart." Jeremiah 48:29. And it was precisely this swelling pride that would lead Moab not to triumph, but to utter ruin. Does it not still happen today, where the promise of harmless enjoyment gradually blinds entire lives to the dangers lurking at the altar's edge, where hearts, once aflame for God, slowly kneel before lesser things, success, pleasure, the accolades of men? And if you found yourself amidst that Moabite celebration, would you have recognized the snare in time? Or would you have danced forward, only to awaken too late to the devastating cost? Moab's story warns us with every echo of its downfall. Spiritual seduction rarely wears the face of an obvious enemy. More often, it arrives smiling, with an outstretched hand, inviting you to a feast that ends at the edge of a grave. We've witnessed how Moab once enticed Israel into idolatry, cloaking traps in laughter and feasting, until the chosen people stumbled into spiritual ruin. But as time marched on, new chapters unfolded, chapters not of seduction, but of lament and devastating prophecy. We leap ahead now by centuries, landing around 715 BC. The mighty Assyrian Empire was sweeping like an unstoppable tempest across the Near East, devouring nations one by one, its armies darkening the horizon with iron and war banners. And it is precisely here, against this backdrop of impending doom, that the Spirit of God descends upon the prophet Isaiah, placing a heavy burden upon his soul, a burden that is both a cry of grief and a chilling declaration of judgment against Moab. Can you imagine Isaiah standing alone in the stillness of evening, as divine words surge through him like fire, demanding to be spoken aloud? He begins his oracle with a line that hangs in the air like a funeral bell. "Because in the night Ar of Moab is laid waste and brought to silence." Isaiah 15:1. How hauntingly that initial blow lands. Ar was not just any settlement. It was Moab's proud fortress, a city carved into the sheer cliffs of the Arnon Gorge, rising out of the stone like a testament to their confidence and strength. Yet Isaiah doesn't predict its fall at dawn, when warriors might rally at the gates. He sees it crushed in the dead of night, sudden and merciless, leaving no time to summon swords or shield trembling families. And Isaiah doesn't stop with R. Like a solemn tolling bell, he calls out the names of Moab's most cherished towns: Nebo, Medeba, Dibon, Heshbon, Eliale, each one destined to resound not with festival songs or chants to their gods, but with sobbing voices, with priests and nobles alike tearing their garments in anguish. What would it have felt like to stand in one of those cities, hearing Isaiah's prophecy, your market streets bustling with trade and laughter for now, all while knowing that soon they would run red and empty? So, what have we learned from this deep dive into the story of Moab? It's a tale riddled with uncomfortable truths, showing us that even the most questionable beginnings don't necessarily dictate a nation's entire story. We've seen how choices, both good and bad, ripple through generations, and how God can even use what was intended for evil to reveal His glory and His ultimate plan of redemption through the Messiah. Ultimately, the story of Moab reminds us that pride and straying from God always lead to ruin. While even within broken lineages, there's always a possibility for unexpected grace. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts. What resonated with you most about Moab's story? Did anything surprise you? What questions did it spark? Leave a comment below. Let's keep this conversation going. And if you enjoyed this exploration of the complexities and surprises hidden within these ancient biblical texts, please consider subscribing. That way, you won't miss out on future deep dives into other fascinating and often overlooked stories from the Bible. Thanks for joining me on this journey.